Let's take a look at the review for this week. To begin with, we started by simplifying rational expression. So, complex rational expression had a fraction on the top and a fraction at the bottom. So, let's take a look. My denominators. I see the two at the bottom are fractions. The top is not a fraction. So, I need to look for my least common denominator. I need to have a 3 and an x. All right, so that's going to be my LCD. Let me multiply each of my fractions. The top, I'm going to call it a whole thing. It's not a fraction. I'm going to multiply that by 3x. The first one, I'm going to multiply that by 3x. My other fraction, let me also multiply that by 3x. And then on top of it, my minus sign in between the fractions, I'll change it to a plus and give that negative to the top. So I'm going to multiply everything by 3x. All right, so looking on the top, 3x times x minus 4, that's going to give me 3x squared minus 12x. Right, multiplied everything by 3x. Now at the bottom, the x's and the 3's cancel out. So from the first, I'm just going to get x minus 4. On my other fraction, the x's cancel out. So when I multiply that negative 9 with 3, I get minus 27. So I'm going to have this as 3x squared minus 12x over x minus 31. You don't have to factor the top. You don't have to factor a 3 and an x. I'm just going to leave it at that. That's my answer. Now, the way I will type this, 3x squared minus 12x over x minus 31. Right now, let's take a look at number 14. I keep an eye on my denominators. It's all numerical. So I'm thinking, what's the smallest number that they all go into? And I'm just going to say 16. So let me multiply each of my fractions by 16. I keep an eye on the sign in between my two fractions. If it was a minus, I will change it to plus and give the negative to the second fraction. But it is a plus already, so just leave it alone. All right, so looking on the top, 16 divided by 8. That gives me 2. So I'm going to multiply the top by that. So on the top, I have 2a squared. Now at the bottom, my first fractions, my 16 with my 16 cancel out. So that gives me a squared. Now my second fraction, 16 divided by 4, that's 4. Multiply with the top, I get that. So my answer is 2a squared over a squared plus 4. That way I will type this 2a to the second powered over a to the second plus 4. All right, let's take a look at number 15. Let me keep an eye on my denominators. I'm thinking, which is the smallest number that they all go into? And I'm going to say, let's see, that this is not a fraction. I'm just looking at my denominators. At the bottom, my 25 is not a fraction. So 9 and 5, I'm going to say my LCD, my least common denominator, will have to be 45. So let me multiply everything by 45. This by 45. I'm going to multiply this by 45. I'm going to multiply this by 45 as well. The minus in between my fractions, I'll change it to plus and give the negative to the second fraction. All right, so let me get rid of fractions. 45 divided by 9 is 5. So I start by having 25a. 45 divided by 5 is 9. So that gives me minus 81. Now at the bottom, 25 times 45, that gives me 1,125. So I'm just going to go, this is my answer. The way I will type this will be 25a minus 81 inside parentheses over 1,125. You don't have to put the little comma for the 1,000, just the numbers 1125. All right, let's take a look at number 16. I look at my denominators, and I'm like, think, all right, my least common denominator. I need a 25 for sure. That comes from the first fraction. I also need a 3x plus 1. That comes from the second fraction. So I'm going to multiply everything by that. I'm going to multiply this by 25 and by 3x plus 1. This by 25 and 3x plus 1. I'm going to multiply this also by 25 and 3x plus 1. All right, so looking at the top, let me start with 25 times 25 to begin with. I have 3 parentheses. I'm going to go 25 times 25. This gives me 625. Now let me go 625 with the top. So 625 times 3x. Once again, I'm just looking at this part. I'm just looking at the top. 625 times 3x. That gives me 1,875x plus 625. Now looking at the bottom, my 25 and my 25 cancel out. So I'm going to multiply 3x plus 1 with x squared. So that's going to give me 3x to the third plus x squared. Now looking at my second fraction, good thing I have a plus. I don't have to cancel things out. The 3x plus 1 with the 3x plus 1. 25 times 25, that's going to give me 625. That's my answer. Now the way I will type this, 1,875x plus 625 over 3x to the third plus x to the second plus 625. Now, let's move on. Let's take a look at number 17. Oh, no, that was 16. So yeah, let's take a look at 17. I look at my first fraction. And I ask myself, can I factor things out? I can factor the 3. The reason why I want to factor it out, because these 3's cancel out. So in this case, my least common denominator will be k minus 2 and k plus 1. Notice that my 3's cancel out. That's why I factor the bottom of the first fraction. So my least common denominator is k minus 2, k plus 1. Right. Here I'm dealing with addition of fractions. So I ask myself, from the 2 parentheses that I'm supposed to have, the one that I don't have on the first fraction is k plus 1. So let me multiply the top with k plus 1. From the two parentheses I'm supposed to have, the one I don't have on the second fraction is k minus 2. So let me multiply the top with k minus 2. So from the first fraction, I just have a k plus 1. From the second fraction, let me distribute the 3k. So it's going to give me 3k squared minus 6k. So from the bottom, let me just copy the two parentheses that I have. K minus 2, k plus 1. On the top, let me combine these by the highest exponent. So I have 3k squared minus 5k plus 1. The way I will type this, 3k squared minus 5k plus 1, all of it inside parentheses, over, at the bottom I'm going to have a big set of parentheses, inside of it k minus 2 and k plus 1. Make sure you factor your denominators just in case you can cancel things out from the top. Now looking at number 18, my first denominator, r plus 6, nothing I can factor, nothing I can cancel from the top. Now looking at my second denominator, the 2 and the 6, 2 over 6, that can be simplified. So at the bottom I have 3r to the second. That's the denominator I have at the bottom. So my least common denominator, I should have the r plus 6 from the first fraction, and I should have the 3r squared from the second fraction. Also, I noticed that I have a minus in between my fractions. So I'm going to change that to a plus, and I put a negative sign on the top. I'm just going to call that a negative 1. So when I combine these, let me change it to blue so I don't get confused with number 17. My denominator, I should have an r plus 6 and 3r squared. From the two parentheses that on my LCD, the one I don't have on my first fraction is 3r squared. So let me multiply the top with 3r squared. For my LCD, the one I don't have, the factor I don't have on the second fraction is r plus 6. So let me multiply the top with r plus 6. All right, so from the first fraction, multiply the two parentheses. That's going to give me 3r to the third plus 9r squared. Looking at the second fraction, let me multiply the negative 1. Well, the two parentheses that I have, that gives me negative r minus 6. Then combine any like terms if we can. In this case, I cannot. So the way I will type this, inside parentheses for the top, 3r to the third plus 9r to the second minus r minus 6. That's all on the top. Over, at the bottom I have a big set of parentheses. Inside of it I have r plus 6 and 3r to the second. Make sure for exponents, don't forget to use the little caret, the little thing that looks like an arrow going to the top. Let's take a look at number 19. I'm reviewing right now from 17 through 22. I'm reviewing addition and subtraction. So looking at number 19, looking at the denominators, I asked myself, can I factor anything? And then hopefully I can cancel things with the top. None of them I can. So my least common denominator for number 19, I will have the factors b plus 3 and b minus 4. So when I combine these, let me have b plus 3 and b minus 4 at the bottom. From the two parentheses that I have on my denominator, my first fraction, the one I don't have, is b minus 4. So I'm going to multiply that with 3. On my second fraction, the parentheses that I don't have is b plus 3. So I'm going to multiply with 5b. Notice I'm not changing the sign of the 5b because I have a plus in between my fractions. If I had a minus, I would change that minus to a plus and then give the minus to the 5b. If I had a minus. All right, so looking at my first fraction, let me multiply my two parentheses. So that's going to give me 3b minus 12. Looking at the second fraction, let me multiply my two parentheses. So that gives me plus 5b to the second plus 15b. So my answer, my two factors that I have at the bottom, b plus 3 and b minus 4. On the top, let me combine my like terms, starting from the highest exponent, 5b to the second plus 18b minus 12. That way I will type this. The top, 5b to the second plus 18b minus 12 over at the bottom. I have a big set of parentheses. Inside of it, b plus 3 and b minus 4. Now let's take a look at number 20. Looking at my first fraction, I can factor out 10. That gives me n minus 1. And the reason why I want to factor a 10, because looking at with the number on the top, 6 over 10, that can be simplified as 3 over 5. The reason why I want to factor things, probably I can cancel with something on the top of the same fraction. Now my second fraction, I cannot cancel anything. So my LCD, we can just start by saying I need a 5, I need an m minus 1 from the first fraction, and I need a 3. Once again, I was just looking at my denominators. However, I'm going to simplify this a little. Let me call this 15 and m minus 1. Notice how the 5 and the 3 are combined it as 15. So my LCD is going to be a 15 m minus 1. The order of the two parentheses does not matter. So, all right. So from the top on the first fraction, from the two parentheses that I have the m minus 1 on the first fraction. But in order for me to get the 15, I need to multiply this top by 3. Now at the bottom of my second fraction, to begin with, because of the minus sign in between the two parentheses and the two fractions, let me give the minus to the 4. Then I ask myself, I only have a 3 and I need a 15. So let me multiply this by 5. All right, in order for the 3 to become a 15, for my first parentheses, let me multiply the top by 5. And then let me multiply with m minus 1 as well. So my fraction, my least common denominator is 15 m minus 1. All right, so let's work things out. On the top of the first fraction, I have a 9. Right, it's just 3 times 3, so that was easy. On my second fraction, I have 3 parentheses. Let me combine the first two. Let me multiply the first two. So that's going to give me negative 20 multiply with m minus 1. Okay, now that I have 2 parentheses, let me distribute the negative 20. So that gives me negative 20m plus 20. So at the bottom, I have a 15 and an m minus 1. On the top, let me combine my like terms, starting from the highest exponent. So that gives me negative 20m plus 29. The way I will type this, negative 20m plus 29, all inside parentheses, over, at the bottom I have a big set of parentheses. I have a 15 and an m minus 1, each of them in its own set of parentheses. All right, let's take a look at number 21. I notice that the 6 over 3 can be simplified. I'm just going to call that a 2. Right, 6 divided by 3 is 2. I know the bottom, I can factor a 3, and that gives me x plus 2. Okay, let's leave it at that. I'm just going to leave it in factor form. So my LCD for this case, I need an x from the first parenthesis, from the first fraction. I need a 3, and I need an x plus 2. Let me abbreviate that. Let me simplify that as 3x, and then x plus 2. All right, so that's going to be my LCD. My least common denominator, it's a 3x and an x plus 2. All right, so looking at the first fraction, I have an x. Looking at my first parentheses, 3x. Seems like I need to multiply that by 3 to begin with. So that will give me the 3x and then the x plus 2. Now looking at the second fraction, I just need to multiply this by x. Okay, so on the first fraction, I have 3 parentheses. Let me combine the first two. Right, 2 times 3, 6. And I'm going to multiply that with x plus 2. Let me multiply that. Let me multiply the 6. So that gives me 6x plus 12. On the second parentheses, on the second fraction, let me multiply my 2 parentheses. That gives me plus x squared plus 4x. So my least common denominator is 3x and x plus 2. On the top, let me combine my like terms, starting with the highest exponent, x squared plus 10x plus 12. The way I will type this will be x to the second plus 10x plus 12 over 3x and x plus 2. All right, let's take a look now at question number 22. I notice the 5's cancel out on the second fraction. The minus in between the fractions, I'll change it to plus, but the negative sign, I'll give it to the p. So my LCD, my least common denominator, will be b plus 5. Right, I only have one denominator, p plus 5. The second fraction, I don't have a denominator. So when I work this, my denominator is p plus 5. It seems like the first fraction, I'm going to leave it alone. The second fraction, I will multiply with p plus 5 because I don't have the parentheses. So in the first fraction, I get p minus 6. From the second fraction, let me distribute the negative p. So that gives me negative p squared minus 5p. So when I simplify this, at the bottom, I have a p plus 5. Not much I can do. Now on the top, let me combine my like terms starting from the highest exponent. So negative p squared minus 4p minus 6. Now to type this, inside parentheses, negative p to the second minus 4p minus 6 over p plus 5. Make sure if you do have any questions, make sure you do email me. I'll be able to answer those questions.